Something we all need to get through in life is money. Whether you're working for a rude boss, facing annoying customers, or being overlooked and underpaid, the chances are at some point you've had a job which just sucks. Well, you might be in a tough spot, but in the Star Wars universe, the worst jobs out there are far more deadly and miserable than we have the pleasure of having here on Earth. I'm about to break down the top 5 worst jobs in the Star Wars franchise, so be sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons, and let's get right into it. First off, we have the Coruscant Underworld Police. Kicking it off with one of the grimiest and most unpleasant jobs, we have the police force which monitors the dangerous criminal underworld of Coruscant. Despite appearing utopia-like on the surface, with the planet housing the Jedi Temple, Coruscant was a planet which held thousands of levels of corruption and gang activity, which was so terrible that a dedicated police force needed to be created just to make even the smallest dent against this treachery. In order to ensure their safety, officers were required to wear a full suit of leather and metal armor, even using mechanical eye coverings which provided them protection against the many chemicals and dangers that they may encounter, as well as giving them anonymity in order to avoid being brought out or blackmailed into helping the criminal organizations. They were often the burliest and most highly experienced units on the planet, since their job often required detaining, combating, and even killing drug abusers, murderers, and thieves every day. Using heavy blaster pistols to quickly deal with threats, they utilized patrol transports to take part in aerial pursuits, as well as a quick dispatch in additional units, and implemented Panther-class police interceptors for high-speed ground chases. Dealing with the scum and villainy of Coruscant's criminal underbelly made this a career with a low average life expectancy, since the guards were often targets for gang members trying to earn their stripes. After that is Bounty Hunter. Bounty hunting is a profession many find cool or interesting, but behind the scenes, the reality is far darker than most of us can stomach. The first and most obvious issue is the lack of morals needed for the job. When offered to fill your credits, you either take the mission regardless of the target, or you go hungry until another job arrives, which could take weeks or even months if you don't have a reputation and if you're not part of the bounty hunting guild. Once you finally get to the target in question, it could be a completely innocent working man, a senator trying to change the galaxy for the better, or even in some dark cases, kidnapping or gunning down children. Besides this though, we need to realize that life as a bounty hunter isn't as glorious as it seems. There were times where even the top 1% of hired guns would struggle to even live a decent quality of life, and there was almost zero time to relax and enjoy yourself. So now think about the average everyday hunter who goes without high-end jobs and barely gets any notice from their opposition. We've seen Din Djarin effortlessly dispatch entire groups of bounty hunters sent after him, and Greedo, for instance, was killed in cold blood by a simple smuggler, which was an event far more famous than anything he'd done in his life up to that point, according to notorious pirate Hondo Ohnaka. If you eventually did reach the big leagues, becoming a big name like Boba Fett or Jango Fett and Cad Bane, then it was possible to live a lavish life. But it was a double-edged sword. The Fetts both got into dangerous wars in a quest for power, leading Boba to barely escape alive, and his father Jango to die in a battle against the Jedi. If you were able to be off the radar, your name would carry enough fame that you may be hunted down, and whether or not that be by crime lords seeking to end the potential threat, or other bounty hunters trying to make their name for themselves by being the one to take you down, this is not really what you want as a bounty hunter. This is no way to live your life. In order to join the Bounty Hunters Guild, which offered higher quality jobs and provided more information to make the task easier, a potential member would need to have proven themselves by earning a significant amount of credits through bounty hunting work, and then go on to pass an intense examination which would see if they truly had what it took to join the organization. So all around, it was still a very difficult and highly stressful job which rarely paid well, and even when it did, it was still extremely dangerous and hard to live a good quality life. And that brings us on to the next job, being a moisture farmer. On planets such as Ord Mantell and Tatooine, which were extremely arid and scorched by the sun, moisture farmers were needed in order to harvest water, since there was no other way to attain it besides pricey imports from water-rich worlds like Naboo. The water was gathered using moisture vaporators, which extracted water from the atmosphere and planetary humidity. Each vaporator harvested an average of 2 liters of condensed water each day. For reference, the average adult needs about 2 to 3 liters of water to be considered healthy. Now, there is some variety here. Some days you might get double the average yield of water, but the average was fairly reliable, causing farmers to typically own a few vaporators on each of their farms. And this may sound like a passive line of work, but these machines often needed part changes, repairs, and were extremely easy to damage, making the farms a good target for bandits. Whether a Tusken Raider or just a group of goons, the farmers and their equipment were extremely vulnerable to attacks, as we saw when Anakin's mother Shmi was taken by part of the Tuskens, and her husband Klieg had his right leg severed. Once again, there was even a water tax imposed on most of the moisture farmers, where rumors indicated that once all of the water tax was collected each week, Jabba would take a huge bath. But this was a rumor Obi-Wan Kenobi stood against, saying that Jabba never bathed, and that he prevented the Lars homestead from being ransacked by Hutt henchmen. Next up is Spice Miner. For a job which is just as physically draining as moisture farming on Tatooine, but involves far darker connections to crime, we have spice miners. Spice was a highly illegal and sought after because, despite being a medicinal mineral, it could be turned into an incredibly potent recreational drug. Spice mines were found across the galaxy, with the most notable being on Naboo, Ryloth, and of course Kessel. The spice mines of Kessel were infamous across the galaxy for being a hub of slavery, wherein the slaves of many different species such as the Wookiees, like we saw in Rebels, and the Twi'leks worked mercilessly with minimal rest, often resulting in being overworked to the point of death. Kessel was divided into two sections, the northern and southern sides. On the northern side, the rulers of the planet lived in extreme luxury with palaces and mansions dotted around their region, everybody living in a form of utopia. They freely allowed and turned a blind eye to the criminal manipulation of slaves in the southern mines, turning that region into a complete wasteland whose only purpose and design was productivity. Workers who slowed down beyond their set quota were beaten, tortured, and ultimately killed if they didn't destroy their bodies in order to keep up with demand. The mines themselves were deep pits and mine shafts as well as massive refineries. The conditions on the sites were extremely harsh, with the temperature being in the pits so cold that thermal suits were needed to even stay alive. There were also various disgusting creatures, ranging in size from a foot to an entire human. And these would viciously attack the miners and sometimes destroy their equipment, making them have to repay a debt to their captors. The mining was done through the use of vibropicks and bore drillers, meaning that the job was entirely physical and required immense durability to keep up with efficiency standards. For this reason, by the era of the Galactic Empire, the Imperial officials stationed there solely relied on Wookiees to get the work done, due to the species' inherent strength and resilience. Although some of these slaves were rescued by Ezra Bridger and the Ghost Crew, there are likely hundreds of thousands, if not millions of slaves who had been worked to death by that time. After that is a Geonosian worker. I know what you're all thinking. How can it possibly be worse than being forced to work in the spice mines? Well, what if I told you there was another form of forced labor which ended up in an entire genocide? This was the horrifying story of being a Geonosian worker in the era of Emperor Palpatine's Galactic Empire. Before we even get to that part, if you were raised as a Geonosian worker, you inherently gave up some of your rights as part of your species, since the workers were entirely submissive to the warrior class who were far stronger and wiser than them. This caste system meant that the Geonosian workers were forced to work in unbearable conditions for days on end, and death was simply part of their culture. It was possible for a worker to become a warrior, but they needed to kill others on their level in an arena for the enjoyment of the workers and elites in their societies. An incredibly cruel system devised to ensure that only the strongest warriors progress beyond common servitude. The many spies and droid factories on the planet were created by Geonosian workers, and even the stunning arena in which the battles to the death between the workers occurred was created by their own kind. After the Clone Wars, with the rise of Palpatine's cruel Galactic Empire, things only got worse for the Geonosians, especially the workers. They were forced to limit their breeding and became a species of slaves for the Empire, with their entire species being compelled to work on the construction of the first Death Star. A splinter group between the Geonosian workers at one particular location, the Korokani Mound, tried to sabotage the Death Star in order to get back at Palpatine, but this was ended by Darth Vader, who then forced the rest of his species to submit and keep building the space station. The entire population of 100 billion Geonosians was then killed through the use of gas canisters, a process named sterilization. Only one Geonosian out of billions managed to survive this revolting event, headed by Grand Moff Tarkin, but they were unable to continue their species for obvious reasons. The Empire did this in order to keep the creation of the Death Star a secret in the early phases, but all the way to the end of their reign, this remained the greatest and most impactful genocide that they had ever committed, even surpassing the one on Alderaan. So that's been the top 5 worst jobs to ever exist in the Star Wars universe. No matter how bad you might have had it in a certain field, there's no doubt that it's better than some of the ones on this list, and I hope you guys never get caught in the Star Wars universe in full dive VR. If you enjoyed this video and found it informative, be sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons for more awesome Star Wars content, and drop a thank Mr. Bounty Hunter in the comments down below, just to show you that you still care about those poor bounty hunters. Thanks so much for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.